Hello, I'm your host, Brian Callanan. The Seattle City Council has just approved a new $8.9 billion budget. Some higher taxes are coming your way, but there are also some new concerns about cuts to federal programs that could impact the city's most vulnerable people. We're talking with Councilmember Dan Strauss, the Council's Budget Committee Chair, and Councilmember Debora Juarez from District 5 in North Seattle to discuss these issues and the questions you're sending in too. That's next on City Inside Out, Council Edition.
We as the city are using our municipalities' strength and power to fight against the idiotic choices made by the federal government.
No one is saying you have a constitutional right to have a grocery store 3 blocks away, but you should at least have the right where the business doesn't decide who gets food and who doesn't.
All that and more coming up next on City Inside Out, Council Edition. And here we are with Councilmember Debora Juarez representing District 5 in North Seattle. Good to have you on the show again.
Good to be back for DJD5.
All right. I love it. I love it. Councilmember Dan Strauss is with us, too. He's Seattle's District 6 representative in Northwest Seattle from Magnolia down to Green Lake. Good to have you here, too.
D6 Dan Strauss, ready to be here.
There we go. Okay. We got the lines down. That's good. Councilmember Strauss, I want to start with you and point out that you also serve as the Council's Budget Committee Chair. And while I know that every budget process is a challenge, this year seemed particularly tricky, if you will. You've got a federal government that's been making some cuts that affect Seattle. You have persistent inflation, slow job growth in our region over the past year. How would you describe the economic health of the city right now, and how did the council's newly approved budget of $8.9 billion respond to that?
I'll start with this is the first year in over a decade that we had a unanimous vote in favor of passing the budget.
Okay.
And so with all of the crises that have been occurring over the last number of years, we'll talk about the structural budget deficit at some point.
Yeah.
This year has been a point of inflection, where last year, we laid off staff for the first time. Then that was absolutely the hardest decision I've made in office so far. We'll get into all of this, but this has all been moving towards this inflection point with making our budget structurally sound. Mm-hmm. In this last year, as you noted, we have had manufactured crisis from the federal government. This year alone, we had volatility rates in the stock market and in our broader economy that were higher than the volatility rates during the pandemic.
Right.
Right. And so there have been
and those forecasts were changing month to month and almost seemed
month to month.
Like, yeah.
And so we took on bigger challenges this year, I'd say, than we have over the last few years. Mm-hmm. And we came out successful because we worked together to solve the city's problems.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
We'll dig in more.
We definitely will. I appreciate that 10,000-foot view, though. Councilmember Juarez, what's your assessment of this year's budget? Did the council get it right? What do you think?
I think we did. And first, let's talk about what Councilmember Strauss said, our wonderful budget chair. First of all, great leadership, transparency.
Okay.
We knew where we were at. The budget was passed, as you said, $8.9 million. Billion, I'm sorry. But I think the big thing is the $350 million investment in affordable housing targeted at building needs of affordable rental housing. And there's more there, but I can go through, we don't need to go through each one.
Yeah.
But I think when we were strategic in looking at what are our needs of our city, the homelessness, public safety, all of those infrastructure issues, and also knowing that another bigger budget's coming in the fall, I want to thank the chair because he's looking at what's the long game here.
Yeah.
What do we backfill now with what the feds are taking away? Mm-hmm. How do we close that gap? And what does the next year look like?
The Trump administration, just for some background here, is not supportive of the Housing First model that King County and Seattle's homelessness response is really based on. Housing First means people are put in housing first, then treated for medical issues, substance abuse disorders, or behavioral health issues. The feds are pushing for treatment first and also adding work requirements for people who receive government housing as well. Housing and Urban Development Secretary Scott Turner put it this way a few weeks ago. We are stopping the Biden-era slush fund that fueled the homelessness crisis, shut out faith-based providers simply because of their values, and incentivized never-ending government dependency. So the City Council put aside $11.8 million in this budget for new shelters, emergency housing. Then you got $12.5 million in rental assistance and tenant services, plus a reserve of $9 million for potential future cuts to homeless services here. I want to talk about what's happening at the federal level here. And is that investment that the city is making, is it going to be enough to deal with what's coming? What do you think?
Probably not. And we talked a little bit about this. I know the chair and I have talked about this as well, and the reserve of $20 million to talk about what federal cuts and how do you backfill that. I know this is really important. I know it gets a little bit wonky, but I think it's really important for people to see that the crisisness of homelessness didn't just start when Mayor Murray said it in 2015. This started in 1987.
When he declared an emergency on
homelessness. That was HUD, continuum of care, and then in 2004 is when HUD said, okay, housing first, rapid rehousing. So that's 04. So that's what we did with Congress. Then we had the 15. We had our mayor say what he said. Now, the two things that hurt us and that are race-based and just plain cruel is when in January of 2025, this president came after the transgender community under his gender identity executive order. Yeah. And then he did what they're calling the anti-homeless order that he did in July 2025. And so then what happened is the federal regulations came out. People saw where we were headed with this. Everyone went, oh my God, you can't do this. You can't take away this money because this legislation, Congress passed this law in '87 to protect people who were vulnerable for homelessness. And what happened with this administration in January and July is they targeted three groups. They targeted the transgender community, the LGBTQ community. They targeted immigrant and migrant workers, and they targeted anything that had to do with DEI. And what they did is they've taken their hate-fueled ideology, infused it in a law that was passed in '87. In fact, that is the overstepping of that. Congress passed the law. Congress has the purse strings. It isn't the executive who gets to change those conditions. And like you said, with rapid rehousing and housing first, for some reason, they really hate that. And they want to impose, like you said, preconditions. You got to be sober. You have to have a job. And they want to reward cities that have bans on camping. So you get more points. I cannot think of anything more cruel, and the reason why I know all this, not because I'm the smartest woman in the room, is because our great AG, Nick Brown, filed a lawsuit with 19 other states and 2 governors, 55-page brief. But when you read it, it really is crystal clear what's happening here. This isn't just hair on fire, clutch our pearls, you're doing something bad, Mr. Trump. This is flat out hatred, cruelty that's been codified that we have to fight against now.
Let's talk about that. Councilmember Strauss, that $9 million put in reserve, I know that was very important to you in this budget process here. Tell us about adding that money and give us a reality check, if you can, about where you think our region's homelessness response is going next year.
Yeah, we've put money aside. It's not enough. It's not going to solve the problem. And I think that we might be the only level of government at this time that has put money aside to be ready to combat the federal government taking away its money. I haven't checked King County's budget. The state hasn't updated their budget since the last time around. And this was an example, or I guess this is an example, of how we as the city are using our municipalities' strength and power to fight against the idiotic choices made by the federal government that can be hurtful and damaging to so many people in our community. So let's just look at this last year. In the middle of when the council had our budget process, was when the SNAP benefits stopped.
Food stamps, et cetera.
The mayor issued an executive order saying that we would spend $1 million a week, essentially. And so from the time that was issued, we could have spent $8 million between the first week of November and Christmas. We put, rather than using the emergency reserves, we set $4 million aside. And luckily, that's about what we spent. When we passed the budget a year ago, the chair's package came out after the election. And so we did not foresee these manufactured crises on our horizon. So we did not put money to the side. That was a very important lesson learned. So that we have been more nimble and ready in this budget. We have money set aside, yes, for the COC. It's not enough.
Continuum of care.
Continuum of care. We have a federal reserve just on its own that we added another $1 million, and I believe another $2 million to at this point. Another change is happening next week as we are allocating the money for the food crisis. So all of these things, we are continuing to make sure that our city is in as strong of a position as we can be, because we don't know what the next problem is going to be. And we need to be ready to fight it.
Thank you for that.
Let me just add one thing. I think what we do know from this administration is the targeting, and from Project 2025, the hate-filled ideology that's coming out of the executive in executive orders and legislation, and then coming down to the states and going back to continuum of care. It isn't just Washington State. There's 19 other states in line and 2 governors from a program. But I guess my point is this is just an example, continuum of care, of all the other hateful stuff that we're dealing with.
Yeah.
So we are going to find ourselves in a defensive posture, quite frankly, for the next probably 3 years.
More broadly, you know, we could go through the budget line by line to say all of the different things, but we made $4 million ongoing additional funding for Office of Immigrant and Refugee Affairs. That's really critical so that they know that they can provide additional services throughout the community, and they don't have to worry about coming back and asking for more money. There's these emergency reserves all across the food funding that we've increased last year and this year. All of these are programs that are set up to make sure that Seattleites are able to stay healthy and safe no matter what's going on at the federal government.
Got it. And I'm not trying to defend the Trump administration at all, but when you hear the HUD secretary saying this is never-ending government dependency, how do you respond to that?
Well, the COC funds?
Essentially, when we're talking about homelessness funding, yes, that's what the secretary is talking about there.
Yeah.
Well, I might ask Councilmember Juarez to jump in, but when I asked my dad, you know, what was homelessness like in the 70s or in the 60s, he shared with me that, you know, especially right after Vietnam, there were a lot of Vietnam vets.
Sure.
But folks who were homeless were people who had really severe mental illness and had a reason that they didn't want, or maybe that they were not ill enough that they didn't get into an institution, but that they were not part of society enough that they wanted to be on their own.
Okay.
And it stuck out to me because it's totally different than it is today. And that's because we had more HUD funding. The mental health institutions needed immense and radical change, but to just close them overnight and then to close the secondary nonprofits. What we're seeing today is a product from the early 1980s of underfunding the basic 4 walls, a roof, and a door that somebody can lock for themselves.
Got it.
By creating generations of this instability, we find ourselves where we are today.
Thank you.
So reducing the funding that keeps people inside rather than on the streets is just going to make this generational problem even worse.
Government is supposed to be the safety net, right, from Roosevelt days. I mean, that's what we created, a safety net, income tax, because when you live in a civilized society and you enjoy a library and a sidewalk and, you know, all these things, that's the point of democracy in a civic society. Government is supposed to be providing those things. And also, who gets to decide who gets more stuff? Congress and the states decide with our delegation and our democracy and our representative government. So that is the point of government. We are always going to have those that are going to not have things. And that is our job of the people, for the people, by the people. What we have institutionalized, what we codify, what we look to in our United States Constitution, that is our job.
Yeah. Okay.
So when people say, oh, they're leaning on government too much, no, it's never too much, it's never too little. It really is conventional wisdom of the time and what the needs are.
Okay, thank you. I want to make sure that I talk about some new and changing taxes, if I could, within the budget here. The city's added a 0.1% sales tax, which the state authorized. That'll go towards public safety needs. Then there's Seattle Shield, approved by voters to change our business and occupation tax system so larger businesses pay more, smaller businesses, about 90% of businesses in Seattle will pay less or no B&O taxes at all in some cases. So together, these two tax schemes will bring in about $120 million. But I have a couple questions I want to make sure I ask. How will adding to the sales tax impact the average Seattle resident? And will taxing big businesses aggressively somehow push jobs out of Seattle? Can you help me with that?
Yeah, sales tax is the most regressive tool that we have, and it's the least. I like it the least.
Okay.
Maybe, you know, I would even venture to say I dislike sales tax increases because I do. It's not, as I said, it's the most regressive form of taxation. And what was most frustrating is that the Association of Washington Cities, all of our 281 cities and towns in this state, asked the state legislature for additional tools to combat the fact that we have been limited on our property tax income less than inflation.
Right.
So in the pandemic, we saw
we
saw inflation up in the 5, 6, I think at one point briefly for 7% inflation. Yet cities are only able to increase their property tax by 1% overall. That's not 1% per person. That's 1% amongst the entire body of taxpayers.
Right.
Over 30 years of, maybe not quite 30 years, but over this long period of time where we are holding cities to being able to increase their revenue less than the expenditures that they're being forced to pay, we're stuck. All cities across the state are stuck right now.
Okay.
And for the legislature to not provide us relief in the ways that we were asking,
I see.
but to provide us this rate of the public safety sales tax, we had to take it, we had to use it because we're out of options. And I'm really frustrated with the state government right now.
Can you talk about that B&O tax piece?
Sure.
And that I think a few people are saying, hey, you raise these taxes on these big businesses, you're going to push businesses, or push employees out.
I think that one of the best parts of that restructuring of our B&O tax is that 90% of our city's businesses will be paying fewer B&O taxes. And when you look at so many of our, I call them owner-operator, not small businesses, but they're owner-operator businesses.
Sure.
Where the owner is actually operating the business. Those businesses are what make up the unique fabric of our city.
Okay.
And they're also on razor-thin margins.
Okay.
And so as we continue to try to support them, it is incredibly important that we do all that we can. And by restructuring this B&O tax, yes, the city comes up with a little bit more money, but if that was our North Star goal, we would have increased the rate a lot more than we did.
Right.
But the goal here really was to right-size this tax for small and big businesses. And in the moment that we passed it, we also needed to begin to shield ourselves from this federal government walking away from their funding commitments. Because if we didn't have this additional $120 million, we would not have been able to address the federal funding cuts as well as we did.
Can you touch on that idea, though, of you're pushing away jobs from Seattle? I'm sure you've heard that critique when it comes to Amazon, some of these bigger businesses, they're going to be paying more when it comes to a B&O tax. How do you respond to that?
I've also heard anecdotally that their employees like to work in Seattle more than they do in Bellevue. But, I think every person's different, every place that they are in their life. If you live over on the east side, you probably want to go to work in Bellevue. If you live here in the city, you probably want to go here. But, beyond all... Yes, maybe some businesses, maybe some jobs go over to Bellevue. There's other proposals at the state government right now to make Jumpstart countywide. A
statewide thing,
And that balances the playing field. But at the end of the day, there's nowhere else other than Seattle that has Pike Place Market, that has the waterfront, that has the ferries to Bainbridge and to Kitsap. It's a place that you can catch a concert after work. That has the Seattle Center, that has Fifth Ave Arts and all of our arts. And Seattle is a very unique place. You can't make that back up in Bellevue. I'd say that we've got a strategic advantage here. But what's also interesting, and I know this is not what you asked me about, light rail crossing the lake not only maybe balances or imbalances this playing field, but it also starts opening up our housing region-wide. So I've been on your show before talking about how it only costs an average of $500 to move in Chicago and an average of $2,000 here in the city, Seattle. And that's mostly because of transit.
Taxes do affect business. That's our tax base. And so what you have to balance is how much do you tax business, knowing that they may leave, and a lot did, let's just be honest, and what the community and what the city needs. And so in our discussions with big business, and quite frankly, Amazon back in the day, and before Jumpstart, after Jumpstart, and then of course with the B&O, is that we still have to balance that. And what we were trying to say is, look, and I remember when I was on Sound Transit, that was the joke, is that the light rail goes both ways. Is that, yes, we will lose some businesses, and we have to be honest about that. But the bigger picture is, this is the first time since the Gilded Age that we have seen such a glaring inequity in wealth. How do you get to be a trillionaire and still have people sleeping under the bridge? That's not what this country was built on. So I know Dan, zeroed in on more specifics, but my big thing, and this is something everyone will struggle with because we know, is the economics, the tax base, who do you tax, but you have to balance that with what are the essential governmental functions that we have to provide to our citizens.
Thank you. I want to move to the structural budget piece that I know we touched on earlier. Councilmember Strauss, the council was able to balance the budget for next year, but the city already knows it's going to face a $140 million deficit in 2027. Robin, one of our viewers, had this question. This year's budget balanced, but going forward, there are large deficits predicted. What do you plan on doing over the next 9 months to prepare for those deficits in the budget next fall? How do you respond to that?
Addressing the structural budget deficit is a multi-year plan, first and foremost.
I think you mentioned a few weeks ago, you can't, in 12 years, you can't fix it in 1 year, things of this nature.
Yeah, and I mean, this is what I said last year, too, is last year, really, we were starting to set the course for the plan to address the structural budget deficit that would take many years to do so. You're right. You saw me quoted maybe a couple of weeks ago that it would be dangerous. It would actually be bad for our city to address the structural budget deficit in 1 year.
Okay.
It took over a decade to create.
Okay.
And I say that because we need to monitor how well we're doing in each area and how the economic environment is.
Yeah.
Right? Because if we suddenly get a construction boom, so back high level.
Yeah.
We got into a structural budget deficit because we had high construction, low inflation.
Right.
Which meant that we had one-time dollars every year for over 10 years that people relied on as an ongoing source, even though it was one-time funding only.
Yep.
Plus, low inflation meant services and costs did not drive very high. We are currently in a low construction, high inflation environment, which is the opposite. And so what we thought would happen a year ago from today is that we would have started the slow growth. What we saw was the federal inconsistencies created volatility that slow growth only really started happening a couple months ago.
Tariffs?
Tariffs.
The tariff, I mean, the April tariff scandal is what I will call it. Of that volatility rate was higher than the volatility rate in the pandemic.
Yeah.
And so, all of this to say, as our economy starts growing, we'll have to monitor that. The things in our budget that we need to stop doing within the general fund, we need to stop doing that. Not to be so awkward, because I know that the general fund is a funder of the Seattle channel.
Yeah, sure.
But that was why.
And many other things.
And many other things, but that was the question that we raised last year.
Yeah.
Rather than cutting the funding for the Seattle channel, let's look at what is a multi-year plan to re-establish a better funding source so that you're not relying on the people that you're interviewing for the funding to keep this great, say it with me now, award-winning Seattle channel.
I appreciate
and
you
I say
saying
that,
that.
and I said that with Councilmember Juarez here because she was the first one to say it out on the dais, and we all just mimic her.
Well, no, but are we heading towards a place where some cuts need to happen? I think people. I mean, is that what we're talking about next year?
Well, I think so. There are going to be again, restructuring every year.
And we get forecasts.
And we get forecasts.
We get quarterly forecasts for national, regional, right down to interest rates. What's it looking like in our rainy day fund? What is it looking like with the market where the city has invested, pensions and funds? So, and you're right, and I think Councilmember Strauss said that, and you said it as well. You can't fix something that's been building for 10 or 11 years, but you do follow the trends. Like all cities do.
One more. I guess just when I'm looking at my levers, we have to look at what are the revenue forecasts that are happening every, once a quarter. We have to look at what programs are we funding that we may not be needing to fund any longer. We need to look at the programs that are emergent that we now need to fund that we may not have needed to in the past. And then we have to look at what are programs that are currently general fund funded, and should they be funded by a discrete and specific source? And so we did that this year with the environmental learning stewards for the Parks Department, and we put them now as youth education through the preschool promise levy. Right? And so, I know that that's one of the conversations that's going on for Seattle Channel is where should your dedicated source of funding be? As we find those dedicated sources of funding, it reduces the pressure on our general fund. And it makes that structural budget deficit decrease.
Well, I think you also had to ask, and this is part of Councilmember Strauss's leadership, is when you work with different council members on when the budget comes down, you know, what is a one-time funding, operational, and then also what is brick and mortar long-term? Does this nonprofit have the capacity to do what they're doing, and have they done it when they've given money before? And just monitoring that. And I don't think I think the public thinks that, you know, I know we've heard the saying many times, you know, the budget is a moral document. And I say, yes, that's true, but there's only X amount of money, right? And so, and as you say, we're going to have this deficit, and we're always in a posture where we're trying to make up that deficit. And now we have the back wall of this administration taking, in a cruel way, the most core services that government is supposed to provide.
Yeah. I need to ask you a question briefly here, and we'll see if you can answer this in a brief way. I highly doubt that, but we'll see how this goes. I wanted to talk about this.
Oh, you didn't tell Dan to be brief, but okay.
No,
right.
I'm laying it on you.
Okay, fine, all right.
Full force here.
I see how this is going to be.
The council recently enacted this ban on anti-competitive covenants when it comes to grocery stores. Could we touch on this? I know it's a big issue up in Lake City when that Fred Meyer shut down.
It is.
I'm trying to figure out what this is about and if this is going to incentivize grocers to come in, or what's next year.
Okay, well, I'm really glad you asked that, because that's been the issue. We've had an executive order and we've had a legislative response to put a ban on covenants on property. So just getting right down to, let's just get right down to what happened in D5.
Yeah.
Because that's a good example of, we got a copy of the deed, we got a copy of the title, there was no existing covenant there. But we are encouraging other folks you can do that. You can get a copy and look at that.
Okay.
And what the Mayor Harrell was trying to do, and we're forward-looking, is that when it comes to food, there should not be covenants that you can't provide food to people based on an economic business model.
Meaning like another competitor couldn't come in. That's what these covenants say.
Well, they say that in theory, but in application, what it does, it denies people the basic human right of food. Okay? And no one is saying you have a constitutional right to have a grocery store 3 blocks away.
Right.
But you should at least have the right where the business doesn't decide who gets food and who doesn't, and how much money we give to our food banks, and how much we've pumped into not just food banks, but all the other services that they provide. So now that we have the covenant, the anti-competitive, I do want to say this, that there is hope, and I just want people to hear this, is that we work really closely with our state delegation, in particular Representative Daria Farviar. I can never say her last name. Farviar. I love working with her. We put an agreement together with Kroger to open up the parking lot we can still have services to North Helpline Food Bank, and also to the Seattle Indian Health Board, which has a full-service clinic and a pharmacy. Every store, Safeway, has come around and provided us with a list of here's all the stores, here's where all the pharmacies are, here are the stores that are delivering food, and Indian Country tribes have really come through, particularly the Seattle Indian Health Board, of providing services to all those folks, and we are still in negotiations. And this gets back to business again. Okay? This gets back to, I know people have ideology and they have an idea about business. Not all business is bad business. I think business have to be good civic partners. And one example, I'll just say it, is Gates. Gates is a good civic partner. The Paul Allen Foundation, I've watched them put up millions of dollars to build houses, and so is Amazon. A little late to the game, but thank you. You're busy going to the moon. So that is what government should be doing.
Okay.
So we got some wins there.
Okay, I'm looking forward to
High five.
What happens there. Can we reach?
Yeah.
Okay, there she goes. You never know. The wingspan. We got to watch out. I do need to wrap up, if I could. Maybe the 20-second version. New Year's resolutions. What do you got, Councilmember Strauss?
Oh, 20 seconds.
New Year's resolution: work out more.
Oh, okay. All right.
I need to get back kayaking. It's one of my favorite activities, and this job doesn't necessarily allow me the ability to prioritize it as
Feel
much.
the burn. All right, Councilmember Juarez, what do you got?
Really? You're going to go there trying to make me look bad. My New Year's resolution? Well, I'm hoping to finish. This is my last year on council.
Yes, that's true.
I'm not coming back again.
You said that last time.
But I did promise you, before I go, though, we'll do one last show, because the last show we did, I really had fun. It was like, ask me anything, and I'll do one more with you. You can hold me to that.
And I hope you had fun today, too.
I did. I always have fun. I think my New Year's resolution is more self-care. And I would hope everyone else would start looking at their lives through a lens of self-care and well-being.
All right. Thank you very much, Councilmember Juarez, Councilmember Strauss. We're on Council Edition here on Brian Callanan, and we'll see you next time.